The mighty empire. The galaxy was filled with stars, but none of them shone as brightly as the empire of the Ilothians. For thousands of years, the Ilothians had ruled over countless planets. Their empire stretched far and wide, its influence felt in every corner of space. No army, no civilization, no power had ever been strong enough to challenge them. They were untouchable, invincible. The Ilothians were a species of towering beings, their skin shimmering with an otherworldly glow. They were feared by all other races. Their ships were the size of mountains, and their weapons could destroy entire cities with a single strike. Any planet that dared to resist them was crushed without mercy. Resistance was futile, and the Ilothians made sure to remind everyone of that fact. The galaxy trembled under their rule. The planets they conquered were forced into submission, their populations enslaved or exterminated if they did not comply. There was no rebellion, no uprising that could stand against the might of the Ilothian Empire. They had perfected the art of war, and their technology was centuries ahead of anything the rest of the galaxy could hope to achieve. But the Ilothians didn't care about the worlds they conquered. They didn't care about the species they destroyed. To them, it was all about power. It was about showing the universe that they were the strongest, the greatest empire that had ever existed. Nothing could stand in their way. Yet, as powerful as they were, there was one world that the Ilothians had not yet claimed: Earth, a small, insignificant planet by their standards, located in a remote part of the galaxy. The Ilothians had heard whispers about it, rumors of a species that had survived against impossible odds, a species that had fought back against the odds when their world was at the brink of destruction. The Ilothians laughed at the idea. Humans, they thought, were nothing more than fragile creatures, easily crushed under their might. They couldn't fathom how such a species could challenge them. They had no advanced technology, no grand fleets of warships. They were weak. Still, curiosity tugged at them. The Ilothians were used to facing challenges, but the thought of a species that could resist, even survive, against the forces of the galaxy intrigued them. And so, after centuries of peace, the Ilothian Empire decided to make Earth their next conquest. The Ilothian fleet, larger than any that had ever been assembled before, set course for Earth. Their ships cut through the stars with terrifying speed, their engines burning bright as they headed toward their destination. There was no need for a formal declaration of war. The Empire had made its decision. Earth was theirs for the taking. The humans, however, had no idea what was coming. The world went about its usual business. People lived their lives, going to work, raising families, enjoying their daily routines. They had no reason to suspect that their world was about to be turned upside down. But on the other side of the galaxy, high above Earth, the Ilothian fleet was already approaching. The first wave of ships entered the atmosphere without warning, unleashing their power upon the unsuspecting planet. The cities of Earth's most powerful nations were the first to fall. New York, London, Tokyo, each was struck by a wave of destruction. Buildings crumbled, fires raged, and millions of people perished in an instant. The attack was sudden, brutal, and overwhelming. The humans had no time to react, no time to organize a defense. The Ilothians' warships were so advanced that no earthly weapon could even scratch their hulls. Yet, as the destruction spread across the globe, a few humans began to notice something strange. A strange hum in the air, a whisper of something new. The resistance was small at first, just a handful of people who had managed to survive the initial assault. But their survival was no accident. One of them, Captain Sarah Daniels, had spent years studying the Ilothian Empire in secret. She had read every book, every report, every piece of information about them that she could find. The knowledge she had gathered about their weapons and tactics was now her only hope. Sarah had always believed that one day Earth would face a threat like no other, and she had been preparing for that day. As the Ilothians continued their attack, Sarah gathered a small group of soldiers and scientists. They hid in the underground bunkers of Earth's capital cities, working tirelessly to understand the invaders' technology. They analyzed the wreckage of the Ilothian ships that had crashed on Earth, searching for weaknesses. And though they were just a handful of people, they discovered something no one else had noticed before. The Ilothians, in all their power, had a flaw. Their technology was incredible, but it wasn't invincible. There were cracks, small vulnerabilities in their systems that, if exploited, could bring them down. But it was a long shot. It would take all their resources, all their intelligence, and every ounce of courage they had. The humans had one advantage over the Ilothians: heart. The invincible empire might have the power, but humanity had something more important: the will to survive, the strength to fight, and the courage to never give up. As Sarah looked out over the city that was still burning from the attack, she knew one thing for sure: humanity wasn't going down without a fight. The Ilothians thought they could destroy Earth in an instant. They thought they could crush humans like they had done to so many others before, but they didn't understand what they were up against. They had underestimated Earth's greatest strength: the first strike. The Ilothians had never expected a challenge. After all, their empire was built on the backs of thousands of conquered worlds, each one reduced to nothing under the weight of their superior technology. Earth, a small, insignificant speck in the galaxy, was meant to be just another easy victory. No one on this fragile planet could stand against their overwhelming force. As the Ilothian warships descended through the atmosphere, the skies above Earth darkened. The sun was blotted out by the shadows of enormous ships, their hulls gleaming with alien metal that shimmered ominously. The ships seemed to stretch on forever, each one larger than the tallest buildings humans had ever seen. The first strike was devastating. A single Ilothian vessel hovered above New York, and with a single command unleashed its weapon. A blast of concentrated energy lashed out, vaporizing everything in its path. Buildings that had stood for centuries crumbled into dust. The ground shook as if the earth itself had been struck by a thunderous blow. In mere moments, the great city was nothing more than a smoldering ruin. Millions of lives were lost in an instant, their screams carried away on the winds of destruction. Other cities followed. London, Paris, Tokyo, all fell victim to the Ilothian onslaught. It was swift, it was brutal, and it was the beginning of the end for Earth. The humans had no time to react. Their military forces were caught off guard, too slow to deploy against the surprise attack. Earth's best weapons, tanks, missiles, and fighter jets, were useless against the Ilothian warships. Nothing they had could even leave a scratch on the mighty vessels. In the chaos, humanity's governments crumbled. The world descended into panic. People fled their homes, some hiding in basements, others running for their lives, hoping to escape the carnage. The Ilothians had arrived, and Earth had no chance, or so it seemed. But among the terrified crowds, there were whispers of survival, of hope. Sarah Daniels, once a quiet military strategist, was not afraid. As she watched the devastation unfold, she knew the truth. If Earth was going to survive, the humans had to fight back, and they had to do it now. Sarah and her team had spent the last few years preparing for something like this. They had studied the Ilothians, gathered intelligence on their technology, and trained in secret. And now, in the wake of the initial attack, their plan was about to be tested in ways they hadn't imagined. "We can't wait for someone else to save us," Sarah said, her voice steady even though her heart raced with urgency. She turned to her small group of survivors, scientists, soldiers, and engineers who had been working behind closed doors for months. "We're humanity's last hope. We may be small, but we have a weapon they never expected: our will to fight." Sarah's eyes flickered toward the ruins of New York, where the Ilothian ships still hovered, their weapons poised to strike again. She didn't know if her plan would work, but she knew one thing for sure: their only chance was to strike back, even if it meant risking everything. Her team had discovered something in the wreckage of the first Ilothian ship: a strange energy source, something unlike anything Earth had ever seen before. They had no idea how it worked, but they had a theory. What if the Ilothian ships were powered by this same energy? What if they could turn it against them? "I've seen what their ships can do," said Dr. Jonathan Albright, one of the lead scientists on Sarah's team. His face was pale, but his voice was filled with determination. "We need to find the source of that power, and we need to figure out how to use it. But it won't be easy. We'll have to get close enough to their ships to make it work. And that's a suicide mission, Sarah." "I know," Sarah replied, her eyes hardening with resolve. "But we don't have a choice. They're coming for us. And if we don't stop them, it's over for Earth. We're going to make them regret ever stepping foot in our world." The plan was risky, perhaps even insane. It involved infiltrating the enemy's ranks, getting close to the Ilothian ships, and trying to learn their weaknesses from within. There were no guarantees, and no one knew what would happen next. As Sarah and her team worked through the night, the Ilothian warships continued their devastation, their destruction spreading across the globe. The clock was ticking, and the world seemed to be slipping further into darkness. The humans' only hope was the unknown, something buried deep within the wreckage of the alien ships, something that could turn the tide. But they were running out of time. The Ilothians were relentless, their next strike only moments away. "We have one shot," Sarah said as she looked over the team, each of them preparing for the mission ahead. "We take the fight to them, and we show them what it means to mess with humanity." The first strike had come, and it had been devastating. But as Sarah's team gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the safety of their underground base, they knew that the war for Earth was far from over. The Ilothians had underestimated humanity, and now they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The resistance grows. The world had been shaken to its core. The Ilothians' first strike had torn through Earth like a hurricane, leaving nothing but rubble and despair in its wake. But in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected began to stir, an undercurrent of resistance. Sarah Daniels and her team had started something. They had proven that humanity wasn't completely powerless, that there was still hope. But they were only a small group, and the war was far from won. Across the globe, people were beginning to realize that they couldn't sit back and wait to be saved. They had to act. It began with whispers. First, in the shadowy corners of cities, in the ruined streets where survivors had gathered. People who had once been ordinary civilians, teachers, doctors, farmers, were now looking for ways to fight back. They had nothing left to lose. The Ilothians had taken their homes, their families, their cities. The time for fear was over. A small group of civilians in Chicago gathered in secret. They had heard of the resistance, of Sarah's team, and their brave stand, and they decided they could no longer wait. They began to sabotage Ilothian supply lines, blowing up alien drones and striking at outposts while staying hidden in the rubble of the fallen cities. They had no real weapons, just homemade explosives and raw determination, but their impact was undeniable. The Ilothians were starting to notice. In London, a group of former military personnel, some of them veterans of past wars, gathered to form a new battalion. Their numbers were few, but their experience was invaluable. They knew how to fight, and now they had a reason to do so. They began raiding Ilothian supply caches and stealing weapons from the enemy. They used the alien tech to learn more about their enemies, trying to reverse engineer it, hoping that one day they could use it against them. In Paris, a network of hackers formed under the banner of the digital resistance. With Earth's global communication systems shattered, it had been difficult for the humans to coordinate their efforts. But the hackers began to piece things together, restoring fractured networks and sending encrypted messages to others who had the courage to rise up. They started coordinating attacks, organizing the scattered humans into a more unified front. Their messages spread across the world, lighting a spark of hope in places that had almost given up. At the same time, there were whispers of something more. A mysterious figure known only as the Phoenix had begun rallying survivors. No one knew exactly who the Phoenix was. a man, a woman, or something else entirely, but their reputation grew with each victory. The Phoenix appeared in the most unlikely places, leading surprise attacks against the Olothians. They were known for disappearing without a trace after each battle, leaving the Olothians in disarray, and the humans cheering for their mysterious leader. Sarah and her team continued their work, their mission growing ever more dangerous. They now had a fragile connection with the growing resistance, a network that spanned the globe. Each group of survivors had their own methods, their own ways of fighting, but they were all united by one thing: a refusal to surrender. Sarah had a feeling that Earth's survival depended on something more than just technology or weapons. It was the humans' indomitable spirit, their refusal to back down in the face of unimaginable odds, that made them truly dangerous. As the resistance grew, so did their belief in their own strength. They were no longer helpless. The tide of the war had begun to turn, just slightly, but it was enough to spark a hope that had long been buried. And yet, the Olothians were not blind to what was happening. They had underestimated Earth's resistance, but they were beginning to notice the growing network of human defiance. It started with small sabotage missions, then escalated into organized raids. Earth's civilians were adapting to the alien threat faster than the Olothians had anticipated. They had thought the humans would cower, broken by the initial shock of the invasion. But they had been wrong. One by one, the Olothians began to notice the shift. Their patrols were ambushed. Their outposts were raided. Supply lines were disrupted. For the first time since their invasion, the Olothian military found itself facing something new, an enemy that refused to give up. Back in Sarah's underground base, her team was working relentlessly to improve their own resistance efforts. They had learned much from their encounters with Olothian technology, and now they were working on a bold new plan, something that could disrupt the alien forces once and for all. It was a weapon, yes, but it was also a message. Humanity was not going to be subjugated without a fight. Humans are like fire, Sarah told her team one evening as they sat around a table covered in blueprints and alien tech. They can burn you, consume you, or they can warm you, light the way. But no matter how hard you try to extinguish them, they always find a way to rise again. Her words rang true. The resistance had found its flame. It burned in the hearts of every man and woman who refused to surrender. The fires of rebellion spread across the globe, from the remote jungles of Africa to the icy tundras of Siberia. Humanity was awakening to the truth. They had the power to fight back. And with each victory, no matter how small, their courage grew stronger. The Olothian Empire, once thought invincible, was now faced with an enemy that would not kneel. The first strike had been devastating, but it had ignited something in the hearts of humans, a defiance that would spread like wildfire. The resistance was no longer just a group of scattered survivors. It was a global force, and it was growing stronger every day. The Olothians had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the will of humanity. And that was a mistake they would come to regret. A turn in the tide. The resistance had grown. The whispers had become roars. Across Earth, humanity was finding ways to fight back, each victory inspiring new hope. Yet despite the growing strength of the human rebellion, it still seemed as if the Olothian Empire was an unstoppable force. The invincible ships remained in orbit, their weaponry devastating any attempts to mount a full-scale counterattack. The struggle was beginning to feel like a desperate game of cat and mouse, with humans barely clinging to survival while the alien empire pressed forward. But then, something changed. Something deep within the Earth, something ancient, was about to reveal itself. It began when Sarah Daniels and her team, along with their network of resistance fighters, made a startling discovery. While scavenging through wreckage from the Olothian ships, they had stumbled upon something unexpected. A series of strange energy readings that did not match anything known to humanity. These readings came from deep beneath the Earth's surface, far from the cities and the chaos. It was as if the planet itself was hiding something. Sarah had a feeling it wasn't a coincidence. Earth had survived the Aleuthians' first strike, but now there was a real chance for something more, something that could tilt the balance of power. Her mind raced as she pondered the possibilities. "We need to get to the source of this energy," she said to her team, her voice filled with urgency. "If it's what I think it is, this could change everything." Dr. Albright, her most trusted scientist, was skeptical at first. "You're talking about an ancient source of energy buried deep under the earth, Sarah. We don't know what it is, how to access it, or if it's even safe." "I don't care about the risks," Sarah responded firmly. "We need an advantage, and this could be our last chance to get one before the Aleuthians destroy us all." The team set out on their mission to find the source. They didn't have much time. The Aleuthians were preparing for another devastating strike, and they could already see the alien fleet mobilizing in space. The humans needed something powerful, something extraordinary, to tip the scales before it was too late. Their journey took them to a remote mountain range in the Himalayas, a place where few had ventured, and where the remnants of an ancient civilization lay hidden beneath layers of earth and stone. As they dug deep into the mountainside, the strange energy readings became stronger, leading them to a massive underground chamber. The walls of the chamber were covered in carvings and symbols, none of which Sarah or her team could recognize. But in the center of the room, surrounded by ancient machinery, was something that caught their breath. A massive crystal, pulsing with light, sat at the heart of the chamber. The crystal was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It seemed to hum with a power beyond their understanding, its energy flowing like a heartbeat through the air. It was the source of the strange energy readings, and as they drew closer, they realized the truth. This was not just any energy source. This was a weapon. The ancient civilization that had once lived on Earth, long before the rise of humanity, had known something that the Aleuthians had overlooked. The crystal was not only a power source, it was a key to unlocking a force that could match the Aleuthian ships. It had the potential to disrupt their technology, to destroy their weapons, to take down their fleets. But it came with a cost. It was a volatile, dangerous force, one that could easily spiral out of control if misused. Sarah stared at the crystal, her mind racing. This could be the answer we've been looking for. It's the only weapon that might give us a chance. Her team worked quickly to understand how the crystal operated. With the limited resources they had, they could only guess at how to harness its power. They began attempting to extract the energy, carefully studying the mechanisms that seemed to bind it. But as they worked, they noticed something else. The crystal wasn't just a weapon. It was a sentient force, alive in some way, aware of their presence. It seemed to react to their every move, its glow growing brighter when they touched it, its energy becoming more unstable as they attempted to tap into its power. "This is insane," Dr. Albright muttered, his hand shaking as he examined the device. "This technology, if it's even technology, doesn't follow any known laws of physics. We're tampering with something far beyond our understanding." "We don't have a choice," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the unease settling in her chest. "If we don't harness this power now, we'll lose everything." As the days passed, they made slow progress, managing to generate small bursts of energy from the crystal. But the risks were mounting. Each attempt to access the crystal's full potential seemed to threaten not only their lives, but the entire underground structure they were working in. The very ground beneath them seemed to tremble with the power that was being unleashed. Outside, the Aleuthian fleet was preparing for its final push. They were moving in to strike at the heart of humanity's resistance, and the fate of Earth seemed sealed. The humans were scattered, disorganized, their forces nothing compared to the might of the alien warships. But inside the chamber, Sarah had a decision to make. They had unlocked the crystal's power, but it was volatile. One wrong move, and it could backfire, annihilating everything around them. But if they could control it, they could unleash a force that would change the course of the war. In a tense silence, Sarah made her choice. "We're using it." The energy from the crystal flooded the chamber, and the walls around them began to crack as the power reached its peak. Sarah and her team had no idea what would happen next, but as they stood together, they understood one thing. They were about to unleash something far greater than themselves. They were about to fight fire with fire, and the Elothians would never know what hit them. The weapon was ready. The tide of the war had turned, and the resistance was about to strike back with everything they had. But even as they prepared for battle, they knew that they had only one chance, one shot to make sure that humanity could survive. The first wave of the Ilothian fleet would soon feel the full wrath of Earth's forgotten power. The ultimate battle begins. The crystal's energy pulsed in Sarah Daniels' hands, its raw power now fully awakened. The underground chamber was vibrating with the force of it, the very earth groaning beneath their feet as if it, too, could feel the weight of what had just been unleashed. The hum of the ancient energy filled the air, and for a moment, Sarah felt an unsettling sense of awe. The crystal wasn't just a weapon. It was alive, and its power had a mind of its own. Yet there was no time to waste. The Elothians had already begun their final assault. Their warships hovered ominously above Earth's major cities, preparing to unleash their devastating firepower. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a race against time. Sarah and her team had only one shot at this, and if they failed, humanity would be wiped out. "We've got to move fast," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. "If this doesn't work, we're finished." Dr. Albright, his face pale but determined, nodded. "We've unlocked the power of the crystal, but we still don't fully understand its capabilities. We need to find the right way to channel it." The team worked quickly, setting up the necessary equipment to harness the crystal's energy. With each passing moment, the world outside was descending deeper into chaos. News reports spoke of entire cities vanishing in blinding flashes, the Ilothian fleet advancing with no sign of stopping. Earth's defenses were already crippled. The only hope lay in the hands of Sarah's small team and their newly discovered weapon. The plan was simple. Sarah's team would travel to the heart of the Ilothian invasion fleet's position, a massive concentration of ships hovering just above Earth's surface. They would need to get close enough to the enemy ships to release the full power of the crystal, a pulse of energy strong enough to disrupt the Ilothian fleet's systems and disable their ships. But the plan came with a grim reality. Getting close to the alien fleet would mean navigating through heavily guarded space, with little chance of surviving the encounter. If they failed to release the energy in time, the Elothians would destroy them before they even got close. The humans had no choice. This was their last stand. As they prepared to leave the underground base, Sarah felt the weight of what was at stake. The crystal's energy was volatile and unpredictable, and its power was far beyond anything they had ever encountered. There was no guarantee it would work, or that they would even survive the attempt. But they had come too far to turn back now. The resistance had already mobilized. Across the globe, survivors were organizing into small units, attacking Ilothian outposts, disrupting communication lines, and keeping the invaders distracted. But these skirmishes were nothing compared to the battle that was about to unfold. This would be the war's defining moment. Sarah's team climbed into their makeshift transport, a repurposed Ilothian shuttle, stripped of its original components and rigged with their own technology. The shuttle was small, nothing compared to the massive Ilothian warships, but it was fast and stealthy enough to get through their defenses. As the shuttle rose into the air and broke through Earth's atmosphere, the planet below seemed like a patchwork of destruction. Cities were burning, and yet through it all, the human spirit refused to be crushed. "Take us in," Sarah ordered as they neared the Ilothian fleet. The battle had already begun. The fleet above Earth was a dark, menacing sight. Hundreds of Ilothian ships hovered above the planet, their weapons locked and ready to fire. Massive warships, their hulls lined with gleaming alien technology, orbited the planet, their sheer size dwarfing anything humanity could have imagined. The air crackled with the tension of impending annihilation. Sarah's shuttle drifted closer, cloaked from detection by the Ilothian ships. Inside, the team worked furiously, setting up the crystal's energy matrix. The air inside the shuttle felt thick, as if the crystal itself was urging them forward, pushing them toward the inevitable clash. "We're almost there," Sarah said, her voice tight with focus. "Once we get close enough, we'll release the energy pulse. The crystal will disrupt their systems, hopefully enough to disable their fleet." But even as she spoke, a wave of dread washed over her. The Alothians had known about Earth's resistance. They had no doubt begun to prepare for this final push, and Sarah knew that the moment they fired the crystal's energy pulse, they would be marked for death. The alien warships would unleash everything they had. There would be no mercy. The shuttle cut through the darkness of space, moving faster than the Alothian ships could react. The fleet remained unaware of their approach, until it was too late. In a flash of light, the Alothian ship's sensors began to flicker. The crystal's pulse, channeled into the shuttle's systems, was far more powerful than anyone could have predicted. As the energy surged outward, a wave of force rippled through the Alothian fleet. The first ship was struck by the pulse, its systems failing as power was drained from its core. It exploded in a fiery eruption, and the shockwave sent ripples through the entire fleet. The rest of the Alothian ships faltered, their weapons firing erratically as their targeting systems short-circuited. A massive hole had been torn in their defensive lines. But even as the first ship fell, the Alothians retaliated. Their remaining warships fired relentlessly, launching missiles and energy blasts toward the shuttle. A wave of explosions rocked the space around them. The shuttle shuddered violently as it was struck by debris and shockwaves, but it held together, barely. Sarah's heart raced, but she couldn't stop now. "Keep pushing," she shouted. "We're almost through." The battle was far from over. With the Alothian fleet in disarray, the human resistance began to rally, launching their own attacks from the surface below. Fighters and small strike ships swarmed the alien ships, taking advantage of the chaos caused by the crystal's pulse. Earth's forces, once fragmented and scattered, were now united under a common cause: survival. The skies above Earth were a battlefield, filled with fire and smoke. The Alothians, despite their superior technology, were beginning to panic. For the first time since their invasion, they realized that they were not invincible. But Sarah knew the truth. The fight was far from over. The Alothians would not give up easily, and this was only the beginning. The humans had dealt the first blow, but now they had to see it through to the end. Victory or defeat. The chaos in space was unlike anything Earth had ever witnessed. Above the planet, the once unyielding Alothian fleet now faltered, its ships disabled and scrambling for control after Sarah Daniels and her team unleashed the crystal's power. In the distance, massive warships fired erratically, their once precise targeting systems now malfunctioning, unable to lock onto their human attackers. The initial wave of Alothian superiority had been shattered. The resistance, emboldened by this unexpected victory, launched wave after wave of fighter jets, strike teams, and guerrilla forces, taking advantage of the confusion to target vital Alothian command centers. On Earth's surface, however, victory was not yet assured. The Alothian general, a towering figure of alien power known as Virain, had been caught off guard, but was far from defeated. As the head of the Alothian military, Virain was a calculating strategist, and he had prepared for this moment. He knew that despite the damage to their fleet, the Alothians could never fully surrender. They were an empire of conquest, and the humiliation of failure was something they would never tolerate. Virain had ordered his remaining ships to regroup and retaliate with full force. Back on Earth, Sarah's team watched as the tide of the battle shifted. The Alothian fleet was not as disorganized as it first seemed. Even as their weapons malfunctioned, their advanced repair systems kicked in, and soon the battle turned into a brutal back and forth. The humans were pushing back, but the Alothians were relentless. "We've made a dent," Sarah muttered, watching the battles unfold on the large screen in front of her. "But it's not enough." Dr. Albright was at the console, analyzing the data from their pulse strike. The pulse is working, but we didn't disable their central command hub. The ships can still communicate and repair themselves. Varan's regrouping, and if we don't stop him now, we'll lose everything. We need to hit them where it hurts, Sarah said, her mind racing. The Alothians had their fleet scattered across the skies, but their central control was still intact. If they could destroy that hub, the rest of the fleet would fall apart. But getting to it would be suicide. It was located in the heart of the enemy's formation, protected by the strongest Ilothian ships. The resistance forces were winning the smaller battles on the ground, but without disrupting the Ilothian command structure, Earth's victory could slip through their fingers. Sarah made a choice. We'll go for it. We can't afford to wait. The team, now joined by a handful of elite resistance fighters, mounted a daring mission to infiltrate the heart of the Ilothian fleet. Their objective was simple but terrifying. Destroy the Ilothian command hub. Their transport, a stripped-down Ilothian shuttle, would carry them directly into the heart of the alien armada, past destroyed ships and under constant fire. The resistance had no time to lose. Every moment they wasted was another opportunity for the Ilothians to regroup, to retaliate. The shuttle, equipped with the last of their experimental tech, was their only hope. As they approached the enemy formation, Sarah could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. She glanced at her team. Each of them knew the risks, but they didn't hesitate. They were ready for the final push, even if it meant certain death. Humanity had come this far. They weren't going to let the Ilothians win now. Lock onto their central command hub, Sarah ordered. We'll break through their defenses and take out the heart of their fleet. It's now or never. The shuttle plunged forward, dodging laser fire and debris as the Ilothian fleet's outer defenses scrambled to engage. For every Ilothian ship they destroyed or disabled, another seemed to take its place. The battle felt endless, and the shuttle rocked violently as they entered the center of the enemy formation. But then, something extraordinary happened. One by one, the Ilothian ships began to stall. Their targeting systems malfunctioned, their weapons misfired, and the lights on their bridges flickered. Varan's once perfect command began to crumble. The pulse. Dr. Albright gasped. It's working beyond our expectations. The Ilothians have lost their communication channels. Sarah didn't waste a moment. The shuttle weaved between enemy fire and crippled ships, maneuvering closer to the heart of the fleet. They were getting closer to the central command hub, a fortress of Ilothian technology that loomed large in the center of the formation. But as they neared their target, the ship shuddered. The crystal's power, which had been a lifeline for the humans, was now starting to take its toll on their equipment. The shuttle's engines sputtered, and Sarah could feel the cockpit growing hotter as the crystal's energy surged out of control. They didn't have much time. We've got one shot, Sarah said, her voice tight with determination. Prepare to fire. With the Ilothian fleet closing in, they deployed the remaining charge from the crystal. One final burst of energy, focused directly at the heart of the Ilothian command hub. The energy beam shot out like a lightning bolt, striking the command hub dead center. The Ilothian ships surrounding it erupted in blinding explosions as the command hub's core collapsed, sending a shockwave through the entire fleet. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The Ilothian fleet, once a fearsome, unstoppable force, was now a tangled mess of debris and disabled ships. The Ilothian Empire's ability to control their forces had been shattered. The resistance had dealt a blow so devastating that the alien fleet was left in chaos, unable to regroup or retaliate. But just as Sarah exhaled in relief, her communicator crackled to life with a cold, unfamiliar voice. "Do not think you have won." It was Varan, his voice laced with venom. "You have destroyed our command, but you have only delayed the inevitable. The Ilothian Empire does not surrender. We will rebuild, and we will crush you." Before Sarah could respond, the communicator went silent. A chilling realization gripped her heart. Though they had struck a monumental blow, The war was far from over. Urain was not one to concede defeat. The Elothians had lost a battle, but their fight was not finished. Humanity had won a crucial victory, but at a cost. They had proved they could stand against the Elothian Empire, but the final victory would require everything they had. The true test had only just begun, a new beginning. The aftermath of the battle was a strange and uneasy calm. The Elothian fleet had been devastated, their command structure shattered, and their ability to retaliate crippled. Across Earth, the sky was dotted with the remains of fallen alien ships, their once mighty hulls now twisted and charred wreckage floating in the void. Humanity had struck a blow that none could have anticipated, and yet the price of that victory was steep. The world below, however, was not filled with celebration. The cities still smoldered, their streets filled with refugees, wounded soldiers, and those who had lost everything. There were no banners of triumph, no parades, just an overwhelming sense of relief mingled with exhaustion. Sarah Daniels stood on the edge of the ruins of what was once London, gazing up at the shattered remnants of the Elothian ships above. It had been a day of victory, yes, but it had also been a day of sorrow. Earth had paid a heavy price to secure this fragile victory. The cost in lives, in the destruction of cities, in the loss of friends and loved ones. It was all too much to fully comprehend. But despite the devastation, Sarah felt something stir deep within her. A sense of something new, something different. Humanity had stood up against the greatest power in the galaxy, and they had not only survived, but they had prevailed. The Elothians had underestimated Earth, and now they had learned the hard way that the spirit of humanity could not be crushed. As Sarah turned to walk away from the ruins, she saw the faces of the resistance fighters who had been with her from the beginning. Their expressions were worn and weary, their bodies covered in scars from the battle, but their eyes shone with something new. Hope. "We did it," one of her comrades said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Against all odds, we did it." Sarah nodded, but her mind was racing. There was still so much to be done. The Elothians might have been defeated for now, but Sarah knew their power and determination. They would not rest until they had rebuilt their empire and taken revenge on Earth. The galaxy had witnessed a rare moment of humanity's resilience, but that moment was fragile. It had to be protected. The resistance had done their part. Now it was time for the rest of Earth to rebuild, to come together as a united force. For too long, humanity had been divided, by borders, by politics, by ideologies. But now, Earth had a common enemy in the Elothian Empire, and a common goal: survival. "Sarah," Dr. Albright said, stepping up beside her, "we've recovered enough from the wreckage to start rebuilding, to restore the technology we lost. We can create something new, a new world, one where we're not at the mercy of invaders. But we'll need everyone to come together, to share what we've learned." Sarah turned and looked at him, a tired but determined smile on her face. "And we will. This isn't just about surviving anymore. It's about thriving. We've proven that humanity can overcome even the most impossible odds. We will rebuild, but this time, we'll do it together." The resistance, once scattered and fragmented, had now become a symbol of human unity. It wasn't just a military force. It was a new beginning for the planet. Earth's nations had learned the hard way that their divisions were their greatest weakness. But through the fire of war, they had learned the importance of working together. Now they had the chance to build something better, something stronger. Across the world, leaders of every nation began to come together. The United Nations, fractured and weak in the past, had gained newfound purpose. They began drafting new agreements, new treaties to ensure that humanity would never again fall victim to invaders. The walls that had divided the planet's people began to crumble as they recognized that their future depended on cooperation and unity. But even as Earth took its first steps toward recovery, a dark truth loomed on the horizon. The Elothians, though crippled, would not disappear so easily. Sarah's team had broken their hold on Earth, but the Elothian Empire was vast, and their thirst for revenge was unrelenting. Varane, their ruthless general, was still out there, and with the remnants of their fleet, they would soon begin to regroup, to rebuild, and to launch their next campaign. "We'll be ready," Sarah whispered to herself as she watched the horizon. "We won this battle, but the war is far from over." The future of Earth was no longer about merely surviving. It was about ensuring that humanity could stand strong, united, and unbowed in the face of whatever came next. Sarah knew that the victory they had won, though hard-earned, was just the beginning. Now they would prepare for the next war, the war for Earth's place in the galaxy and for humanity's future. The Alathians would learn, in time, that humanity had no intention of being ruled, no intention of being crushed. Earth had been forged in the fires of war, and from that fire, something new had been born. A new era for humanity had begun, and this time, Earth would be ready.